Hello. In this lesson, we will be discussing a different technique, perhaps, for exploring and understanding theme. This is something I like to call asking the essential life questions. First, let's begin with a definition of theme. Theme is often defined as the author's insight or insights into life, or the author's message about a specific aspect of life. In general, themes that are considered the most lasting and relevant are those that are often described as universal. In other words, they appeal to people on a very basic level because they explore what it means to be human in general. And therefore, these themes speak across cultures, languages, genders, and across time. It's why we can enjoy Shakespeare 400 years after those plays were written, because he's dealing with themes that are still very relevant to being a human being. Sometimes when we're analyzing theme, that abstract definition, an insight into life, can become very difficult, especially if the text is complex. And we're being asked to articulate and explain with text details a theme. This can become very challenging because it is a very abstract concept. One way to begin thinking about theme is to consider, instead of definitive statements, what questions the author is asking the reader to contemplate. By identifying what I like to call the author's essential life questions, it can often be easier to arrive at a clearly articulated theme statement. Let's look at this technique with a classic, it's old, but classic film, The Dead Poets Society. If you haven't seen it, I encourage you to watch this film. But you can understand the point here, even maybe without having seen the film. One of the most important themes from this film comes from its famous line, Carpe diem, which means seize the day. But if we go further, and we ask ourselves what essential life questions the film is asking us to contemplate, we can go even deeper. What does it really mean, after all, to seize the day? One area of concern in the film is expectations. So this is just kind of the general label that I gave this part of the film. For example, in the film, this young boys face tremendous pressure from their parents to make good grades and attend exceptional universities. And in this way, the film seems to ask these questions. Is it ever okay for parents to push their kids so hard? What are the consequences of parental or adult pressure on kids? Are good grades and fancy degrees the true measure of success? Do they lead to happiness? And we can go even further. How and when should we follow our parents' wishes for us? And when should we forge our own paths, even if it means risking disappointment or disobeying our parents? So these are essential questions that the film is asking with regard to expectations. Another technique used within the film is literature is a very symbolic portion of the film. I've included some film clips here as well if you're interested in watching those as we go. So literature really symbolizes throughout the film feelings and emotions and life itself. So some of the questions that we could say the author or the filmmakers are asking us to contemplate might be things like, is poetry about form or feeling? Is life about form or feeling? When should I follow my gut feelings or follow my heart? Or when should I allow logic and reason to guide me? When do I share my feelings with another person, or when do I keep them private? So these are essential life questions, and the film uses literature to have us ask those things of ourselves. Another part, a very important part of the film, deals with authority and traditions. And through the characters and the plot, we find ourselves asking things like, when traditions are outdated, how do we rid ourselves of them? Why is change and difference so difficult to accept? Is it more dangerous to follow traditions or to break them? And what would I be willing to risk to break free from rules or traditions that I don't agree with, I don't believe in, or I don't want to follow? When we put all of this together, it might look something like this. So we know that this is a major idea within the film, carpe diem, seize the day. If I begin to break that apart into specifics, like expectations or literature or authority, and I think about those, and then I ask the question, what is it the author or the filmmaker is asking me to contemplate? And I arrive at those questions that we just looked at. Then I maybe can more easily arrive at a definitive theme statement. For example, I could say, young people should be allowed to make their own decisions about their futures. Or, finding the courage to trust our own feelings and intelligence can lead to true happiness. Or something like, rules and traditions that harm individual freedom should be challenged. And so, where I may not have been able to do that right off of the bat when I'm doing an analysis, if I allow myself to ask those questions and really put myself in the author's position of what does the author want me to consider about his or her story, I can sometimes get to much more concrete or definitive statements as I go. From there, then we can begin to ask how. How does the author get me to think these questions or to consider these concepts? And this is where we can go even further. How does the author create characters that help us understand those life questions or themes? How does the author use meaningful dialogue to center around those themes? How does the author make sure that the plot and conflict is always pointing to those essential life questions? How does the setting itself contribute to the themes? And then I can go to even much more specific statements of analysis when it comes to a story or theme. So now my analysis can become highly specific. I should be able to support my theme statements with specific references to the text itself. So for example, young people should be allowed to make their own decisions about their futures. That may be true. How can I prove that with the film itself? Or if we were looking at a text, with the text itself. So I might write something like this. The character of Neil in The Dead Poets Society is devastated to learn that his father is forcing him to enter military school and attend Harvard to become a doctor. The author strategically places this scene after Neil experiences great success and happiness acting in the school play. As a result of this news, Neil commits suicide. His death serves as a catalyst for the shy protagonist, Todd Anderson, to, quote-unquote, seize the day and speak out in support of Mr. Keating. So I can get to a very high-level analysis now because I'm using the film or the text itself to support my my much more general statement of theme. Throughout this course, I'll be asking you to use this method of asking the essential life questions to discuss theme, as well as how the author uses the basic elements of literature like character and plot to build those themes. So I will constantly probably be asking you, okay, what do we feel are the essential life questions the author is asking us to contemplate? So I wanted you to be prepared and understand what I mean by that statement through this lesson. Furthermore, as you prepare to write your own short story, it may be helpful to ask your own essential questions about your characters, your setting, your plot, and your theme. How will you develop those things in order to communicate clearly what it is you want your readers to know? I've included some other examples here from some well-known texts of potential essential life questions that these texts seem to ask, or the authors seem to ask the readers to contemplate. So take a look at those, and that might help you to further understand this idea of essential life questions. Thank you.